I used to think being poor simply meant not having enough money. Later, I realized something much darker. The worst part of poverty is not having only a few dollars left in your bank account. The worst part is that even when you are not spending money, your brain is still calculating money. You calculate while eating. You calculate while driving. You calculate when you lie down to sleep. There were nights when I woke up at 3 in the morning, not because of a noise, not because of a nightmare, but because my brain suddenly remembered, rent is due in 9 days. I did not need to open my phone. I did not need to check my banking app. I knew exactly how much money I had. $840. That was everything I had at 24 years old. On a Thursday night, I sat on the edge of my bed. The room was dark. The only light came from my phone screen. $840. Rent was coming. Electricity. Water. Phone bill. Food. Gas. I started subtracting. No paper. No calculator. My brain had done this too many times. After everything, I had about $60 left. $60. It does not sound like much, but back then, $60 was the distance between surviving the month and watching the whole thing collapse. A flat tire. Medicine. An unexpected bill. A car problem. One thing goes wrong, and I am done. I call this involuntary arithmetic. You no longer decide to calculate. Your brain calculates for you. Every time you walk into a store, it calculates. Every time you see the price of gas, it calculates. Every time your friends ask you to go out, it calculates. This meal is $14. If I order a drink, that makes it $18. $18 is almost 1/3 of what I have left. No. It is like software running in the background of your mind. It never shuts down. It never becomes quiet. And the worst part was, I thought this was normal. One night around 10:15 p.m., I went to a laundromat. I still remember the lighting. White, cold, flickering neon. The dryers spun endlessly, making this low mechanical hum. I leaned against a plastic folding table and stared at my clothes turning inside the machine. But my mind was somewhere else. I was calculating. $20 for gas tomorrow. About $35 for groceries this weekend. If nothing unexpected happens on Monday, maybe I will be okay. If something happens, I do not know. I was standing in a laundromat, but inside my head it felt like a control room filled with warning lights. Then I noticed an older man, maybe 60 years old. He stood in the corner, slowly folding his clothes. One shirt. Fold. Set it down. One pair of pants. Fold. Set it down. No rush. No checking the time. No looking at his phone. No sense that he needed to finish quickly so he could run to the next thing. I watched him for a while, and I could not understand why the sight of him made me uncomfortable. Years later, I finally understood. He had something I did not have. Stillness. Not silence around him. Silence inside him. My mind, on the other hand, was never quiet. That night, I went home. I placed my phone face down on the table. I told myself, stop calculating. Less than 10 seconds later, I was calculating again. That was when I realized something painful. Poverty had trained me to become extremely good at survival. I knew how to cut expenses. I knew how to live on very little. I knew how to delay every want. I knew how to endure. But those same survival skills were slowly becoming a cage. Because when your brain spends all of its energy trying to survive this week, there is not much energy left to think about 5 years from now. You do not build. You react. You do not create. You put out fires. You do not invest in the future. You protect tomorrow. That is the trap. A lot of people think poor people only lack money. They do not. They also lack mental bandwidth. When your mind is constantly processing scarcity, there is almost no space left for large, creative, long-term decisions. And I knew, if I did not create that space, even if my income increased, I would still live like someone waiting for disaster. I did not change because of a book. No mentor appeared and gave me a secret formula. I made one very small decision. $600. I called it the floor, a line I was never allowed to fall below. I opened a separate account. No debit card, no automatic payments, no connection to anything else. And I put $600 into it. Then I told myself, this money does not exist. The important part was this. It was not an emergency fund. An emergency fund is money you expect to use when something goes wrong. My $600 was different. It was dead money. Intouchable. I did not create it so I could spend it. I created it to teach my brain one principle. Not everything I have can be taken away by life. It sounds simple, but the first month was brutal. There were days when my spending account became dangerously low. I could see the $600 sitting in the other account. A few taps, and I could move it. My brain started whispering, just transfer 50, put it back next month. It is not a big deal. You are struggling right now, but I knew exactly what would happen. 50 becomes 100, 100 becomes 200, and one day, the floor disappears. I call that reaction the drought protocol. It is like the brain of someone who has lived through scarcity develops an alarm system that is far too sensitive. The moment your balance drops, it screams, danger, danger, danger. I could already be earning more money than before, but my nervous system would still be living in the past. This is something most people do not understand. Escaping poverty financially does not automatically mean escaping poverty mentally. You can triple your income, but if your heart still races every time your balance drops, if you still buy things to prove that you are successful, if you still believe one bad event could destroy everything, then poverty is still there. It is just wearing nicer clothes. 14 months after creating that floor, a band I loved announced a reunion. I had been waiting for it for years. Tickets were $240. I opened the app, picked a seat, reached the checkout screen, then I just sat there. I remember staring at the screen for about 6 minutes. The money was sitting in that dead account. Enough to buy the ticket. More than enough. Nobody would know if I transferred it. Nobody would punish me. Nobody was watching. This was a battle only one person knew about. Me. Eventually, I closed the app. I did not go to the concert. I was not happy about it. Do not listen to motivational nonsense and imagine that discipline always feels empowering. It does not. Sometimes, discipline feels terrible. The thing you want is right in front of you. You have the ability to take it. And you still tell yourself no. That night, I regretted it. But something else happened at the same time. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could trust myself. I had created a rule, and I kept it, even when nobody was watching. That is when I started to understand. Finance is not just math. It is personal honor. If you constantly break the promises you make to yourself, do not be surprised when you stop trusting yourself. Over time, the 600 grew, but the biggest change was not in the bank account. It was inside my head. The hum got quieter. It did not disappear completely, but it got quieter. I started becoming capable of thinking further ahead. 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. And once my time horizon changed, I started seeing the people around me differently. One of my coworkers, Theo, bought a car for around $41,000, 60-month loan. The first day he brought it to work, everyone came outside to look at it. Shiny paint, new interior, large display. Theo told us how much his monthly payment was. He said it proudly, but I saw something completely different. I saw 5 years of obligation. I saw a piece of his future income already sold. I saw a man who would have to keep working, not because he wanted to, but because the car required him to. Meanwhile, I was still driving a 9-year-old Honda. The dashboard had a crack running across it like a river delta. Every time I turned left, the CV joint made a clicking sound. It was not impressive. Nobody looked twice. Nobody asked how much it cost. That car told the world I was nothing special. And I started to like that. Because for the first time, I did not need the world to think I was rich. I needed myself to become free. Those are two completely different things. The thing I started building was no longer an image. It was the name, reputation, credibility. I began working according to a very simple rule. If I say I will do it, I do it. If I do not know, I say I do not know. If I am wrong, I admit it. I do not overpromise to make people like me. I do not decorate the truth. I do not try to look smarter than I am. Then something strange happened. A client named Raymond called me. I asked, "How did you hear about me?" He mentioned someone. That person had heard about me from someone else. I had never even met some of the people in that chain, but my name had traveled through them. It had entered rooms I had never physically stepped into. That was when I understood. Money may not go ahead of you, but your reputation can. The name is a strange kind of asset. You cannot see it. You cannot photograph it and post it online, but it quietly opens doors. And if you build it long enough, It starts making money for you. But becoming financially mature does not only bring victory, it also brings a strange kind of sadness. I call it quiet grief. When you start thinking in 10-year timelines, it becomes harder to talk to people who are still thinking in 15-day pay cycles. A friend of mine, Cassandra, decided to buy a house that was far beyond what she could comfortably afford. I knew the numbers. I saw the mortgage, the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance. I could almost see the next 5 years of exhaustion waiting for her. But Cassandra was not buying the house because she simply needed somewhere to live. Her parents wanted her to buy. Her friends had already bought. Her Instagram feed was full of new keys and smiling couples standing in front of houses. She felt like she was falling behind. I almost gave her advice. Then I stopped, because I realized something. I did not have a language that could translate what I was seeing into something she wanted to hear. She was asking, "What will people think of me?" I was thinking, how many years of freedom will this decision cost? Those are two different languages. The distance between me and some people I loved slowly grew. There was no dramatic fight, no betrayal, no announcement that the friendship was over. It was just, one day, I looked back and realized two pieces of ice had drifted apart. This is a part of change that very few people talk about. When your operating system changes, some old relationships stop running smoothly. By the time I was 34, I received a payment I will never forget. $420. Not a large amount. I had made bigger payments before. But this $420 was different. It came from a rental property. After all, expenses were paid. $420 entered my account. I sat there staring at the number, because for the first time, money had appeared without requiring my direct presence at that exact moment. I did not have to be there. I did not have to stand in front of anyone. I did not have to sell more hours. I did not need to ask, how many more hours can I work this week? That was the first audible sound of a machine I had spent years building. $420 did not allow me to retire. It did not make me a millionaire. But it proved a theory. You can build a life where your value is no longer completely tied to your presence. From that day forward, I stopped wearing busy like a medal. I no longer wanted to prove I was important by always being available. I did not want to become the kind of person where money only moves if I am physically present. I wanted systems, assets, reputation, things that continue working even when I am quiet. Years later, I went back to my parents' house. Almost everything was the same. The old linoleum table, the kitchen, the light, and the refrigerator. That same low hum. I stood there in the kitchen and suddenly remembered the laundromat when I was 24. My parents asked me, "Are you saving money these days?" I said, "Yes." That was all. I could have talked about yield, cash flow, capital, assets, but I did not. Not because I was better than them, not because they were incapable of understanding, but because that house had been built on a completely different financial operating system. In that house, money existed to help the family survive this month, not to create freedom 10 years from now. And for the first time, I understood. There were two operating systems living inside me. A new one, calmer, more structured, more long-term, and an old one, still startled when the balance drops, still tempted to hoard, still reacting to uncertainty like that 24-year-old kid who only had $60 left. You do not erase your past. You simply learn not to let it drive the car. I stood in that kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum, and suddenly, I remembered the 60-year-old man at the laundromat, slowly folding one shirt at a time, not checking his phone, not rushing. Back then, I did not understand what he had. Now I do. Stillness. But that kind of stillness does not come from how much money you have. It comes from knowing where you are going. You know which lines you will never cross. You know what is worth buying and what is simply buying approval. You know you can trust yourself. You do not need everyone to understand your choices. You do not need your neighbors to think you are successful. You do not need your friends to be impressed. You do not need your car to explain your value. And most importantly, you do not need to turn busyness into proof that you matter. I used to think financial freedom would be loud. The sound of a new car. The sound of a big house door closing. Bank notifications. Accounts filled with more digits. But no. In the end, freedom is almost silent. It is sitting down at night and realizing your brain is no longer automatically calculating how many days remain until payday. It is having your car break down and thinking, Okay, I will fix it. Instead of feeling like your entire life is collapsing, it is seeing something expensive and no longer needing other people to know that you could afford it. It is being able to say no to something exciting today because you have chosen something bigger 10 years from now. If I had to name the exact day I began escaping poverty, I would not choose the day I earned my first large amount of money, not the day I bought my first asset, not the day cash flow started arriving. I would choose the day I took $600, moved it into a separate account, and said, "Nobody touches this, not even me." Because that day, I started building something more important than money: trust in myself. A lot of people want to change their lives with one giant move. Make more money, invest big, start a company, buy assets, but they cannot keep one small promise to themselves. That is the part that should scare them. You cannot build a 10-year life with a person who changes decisions every 3 days. You cannot become free if every new desire is strong enough to destroy the plan. And you cannot escape poverty if every dollar you earn must be spent proving to other people that you are no longer poor. I used to be that person, and eventually I understood. Some people make a lot of money and still live in psychological poverty, and some people are not rich yet, but they have already begun entering freedom. The difference is the operating system. One person asks, "Can I afford this?" The other asks, "Is this worth trading away part of my future freedom?" One person lives to avoid looking poor. The other stops caring what people think. One person needs money to look successful. The other uses money to buy back time, choices, and peace. I still remember those $60. I still remember the neon lights, the sound of the dryers, the old Honda, the $240 ticket I did not buy, the first $420 that arrived without my direct labor, and the hum of the refrigerator in my parents' kitchen. Those were not meaningless details. They were milestones in a revolution that happened quietly inside my mind. I did not become a different person overnight. I simply started creating small boundaries, then protecting them, again and again, until one day, I realized the hum inside my head had become much quieter, and the stillness of that man from years ago had finally become my own. If today you are still trapped inside survival calculations, I am not telling you to immediately do something extraordinary. Maybe your first step is simply to create a floor, a number small enough that you can realistically protect it, but serious enough that betraying it is no longer acceptable. Then keep it. Do not make a show of it. Do not brag. Do not ask for approval. Just keep it. Because maybe what you are building is not a pile of money. Maybe you are building a new version of yourself, a person who can think beyond the next paycheck, a person who does not use consumption to prove their worth, a person whose name becomes valuable before their bank account becomes large, a person who can choose instead of react. And one day, you will understand. Escaping poverty does not begin when your bank account finally has a lot of zeros. It begins when fear no longer controls every decision you make. Money is part of it. But freedom is when your mind finally becomes quiet